What is up, my beautiful gemstones? Welcome back to my channel, and if you're new here, just welcome. My name is Gemma Jade, and this is the 6th night of my 7 nights of Halloween, and we are going to be discussing hungry shadows. So I originally wanted to talk with you guys about so-called hungry ghosts tonight, but the thing is, most of what I found would only refer to the different religious aspects of that concept, so I didn't have enough time to put together a video where I'm actually allowed to discuss what it is I wanted to. I would just like to briefly discuss it here because I think it's important, and then move into some encounters and information regarding shadow entities that have allegedly attacked the living. I know that's something no one likes to talk about all that much, but I've seen it happen on more than one occasion, and I think that something needs to be said about it. So with just that being said, let's jump right into it. The concept of hungry ghosts or spirits is not a very widely known one here in the West, so let me paint a scene for you, okay? Try to imagine for me that you've woken up in the wee hours of the morning. It's still dark outside, and before you can even look around and try to get your bearings after coming out of either a sound or more than likely a restless sleep, you are confronted with something terrifying and grotesque, one of the most hideous and frightening creatures you could ever dare to even imagine. Imagine it has withered arms, a gigantic wide neck and pale skin. The monster also has legs that seem withered, a huge stomach, and a mouth that's smaller than a dime. It stares at you, malevolence literally oozing off of it as it leans in closer to you as you sit up in your bed. You're paralyzed. You're overcome with fear. As the monster leans in, real close, you suddenly have a revelation that it is there to drain you of your life force, to overtake and feed from your very soul, the very thing that is at the core of your existence. It's there to eat you. You don't know how you know that that's what's happening, but you absolutely know it's true for absolute fact. You are overwhelmed with helplessness and quickly look around and scan your surroundings for something to fight this thing off with. You're suddenly very weak, and the pure terror you're feeling is unlike anything you've ever experienced before. However, before you can even have more than a moment to react or to fend for yourself, it's gone. Disappeared in the blink of an eye, and you're left there alone in the darkness of your bedroom or wherever it was you fell asleep, confused and probably scared out of your wits, wondering what else could be lurking there in that darkness. So what just happened? What did I just describe? Where did the entity go, and why did it leave so suddenly? Well, as some of you may have guessed, or at least those of you that attend Oracle regularly and take my Gemma 101 class that I give every week in that stream, the entity was satisfied. It was well fed. It was sated, as it was that same terror and fear that you were overwhelmed with that it was there for in the first place. Whether you realize it or not, guys, that is an encounter with what some people, myself included, like to call a hungry ghost. This concept isn't so well known in the West because it was conceptualized in the Far East and in India for the most part. According to them, it's tied to karma, how we choose to live on the physical plane while we're here, and the consequences of having chosen a wrong path given to those who have done so in the afterlife. Now, that's their religious idea. And wherever you think you're going in the afterlife is where you will go, including if you think you'll stay here and haunt the living. I don't know exactly how it works, and I don't pretend to know. But I do know that if you aren't a very good person while here in life, if you don't cross over immediately, you will still not be a very good person while an earthbound spirit stuck here and looking to feed off of living people's fear and terror. I often wonder if these really are the ghosts of the once living or something else altogether. Let's discuss Stephen Painter. He was only 5 years old when he had his dreadful experience at a family friend's home in Bury, Manchester, England, and he thought at first that someone had broken into the house. He was frantic, and he said of what happened to him, quote, "Around 1986, my mother took me around the local estate to her friend's house. I believe that she had been burgled because her kitchen, her entire kitchen, was covered, and I do mean covered, in big black handprints. It was almost animal-like," end quote. He didn't say anything about the handprints, though, not until years later. When he finally did mention the incident again to his mother, he mentioned how strange all of the black and animal-like handprints had been, probably inquiring what had put them there in the first place. However, his mother turned to him and said, quote, "There was nothing on the walls, Stephen," end quote. Stephen was shocked. He knew with absolute certainty and remembered very clearly what he had seen that night. He had never forgotten it, and he knew it couldn't possibly be that no one else had seen the prints. His mother's friend, the woman whose kitchen it was, had even mentioned earlier that day that she had been seeing shadows in the images of large strange looking faces on the wall. Stephen's mother, though, wouldn't listen, and she would insist that there was nothing on the walls and that he was remembering things wrong. Stephen said, quote, there was nothing on the wall from her point of view, end quote. From that moment on, the moment in the kitchen when he saw what no one else had seemed to see, Stephen was plagued with darkness. The animal-like prints he had seen on those kitchen walls when he was only 5 years old had turned into actual entities. He also said, quote, I've seen a big black mass with red eyes always at my door, the hat man always in the background, and typical shadow people just like our own shadows on a sunny day, end quote. I really, really do feel this guy's pain, and I understand what he's talking about, as these so-called typical shadow people have become just a normal part of his everyday life. He even gave them a nickname. He called them Joeys and says he's seen them mainly in his dreams, and those dreams are incredibly violent. Remember, this was 1986, before shadow people were a thing that we all knew about and openly discussed, so it makes sense that a little kid would want to give a name to them. Stephen said, quote, every time after this that I've encountered these beings, I've always been in a sluggish state and able to see my own body in the bed. Always I've been chased. They have blocked my doorways and tried to scratch or make physical contact with me, end quote. Of course, doctors and the world of medical science insisted to Stephen that these nightmares were caused by a sleep disorder, but he knew better, and he knows better. When the entities appear to him, he says the room seems to buzz with energy, with electricity, and he knows immediately that he is no longer alone and the entities are there with them. He said of it all, quote, the situations are like out-of-body experiences. I can see myself in the bed, end quote. When he was 16, he vividly remembers being chased through the garden outside and into the house. He ran and got into his bed, which then started to envelop around him. He continued, quote, I awoke, but I couldn't move. I felt like I had just run the London Marathon. I had a cramp in my left leg, end quote. In more recent years, Stephen has been waking up and discovering real physical marks on his body. He said, quote, I have awoken usually feeling like I've been active all night, muscles tense and aching, and even my fingers hurt. On 2 occasions, I've had small scratches on my side, my right side, always after an encounter, end quote. Stephen says that during the encounters, the Joeys are the ones chasing and approaching him and causing him so much trauma and pain. So far, all of this is terrifying and creepy, but rather benign. I guess, depending on what level of insanity and terror you're used to, but I think it's rather benign. That's because nothing that happened so far was anything near, and it all paled in comparison to what he likes to call the attack. Painter said, quote, it was around 3 years ago. I went to bed as normal and felt my usual pre-attack buzzing, and I fell asleep, end quote. The next thing he knew, he was standing at the side of his bed, staring down at himself, lying next to his then girlfriend, who was sleeping in the bed with him. His eyes were frozen open, and he continues, quote, I knew instantly what was going on, and I tried to wake up. I panicked because I've never seen myself like that before, and I thought that I was dying, end quote. Imagine that. You're having this out-of-body experience, and a lot of people think that that's exactly what happened when you die, because it is. So he was kind of experiencing not a near-death experience, but an out-of-body experience similar to when our time here on this plane is done. Anyway, one of the shadow entities lunged at him while the other reached out to try to scratch or claw him. As was usual during these dream states, Stephen's movements were very slow, like he was moving underwater, but he had a surprise for them. Stephen Painter was a jiu-jitsu instructor and tried to fight them off nonetheless, and regardless of the terror and confusion I'm sure he was overwhelmed with at the time. He said he wrestled the shadow people, and once he landed enough punches, they quickly retreated behind the Hat Man. It was like the little kid who hides behind their mama when they're feeling shy or scared. Once the entities retreated behind their leader, he said of what happened next, quote, I then turned around, and for the first time ever I saw a line, a silvery line like a tail almost from my back. Then I awoke wet through and with my heart going very fast, end quote. That makes me a little bit nervous because those silvery thin lines are our soul connections, are the people that we are inevitably and forever linked to throughout lifetimes, and on the other side we are connected by those cords. Now we can also make them with other people. Normally the sexual act will create those bonds. They can very easily in those cases, like, you have to build the relationship, but if you have a relationship over lifetimes, you know, your soul connected, your twin flame, you'll have these silver cords and strings with them. And That's weird to me. I've never seen someone who was soul connected to shadow entities. So I don't know if when he said I was wet through means he was soaking wet and drenched in sweat, or if he's admitting that he urinated on himself, but he said he could still feel the presence of the shadow entities, but he could no longer see them. His fingers were extremely sore from the attack, and when he looked in the mirror, he noticed that his left side bore a large slap mark. The attacks have changed since he used his training to literally physically fight the entities off, which I've also never heard of anyone doing. I've never heard of anyone having their own physical contact with the entity. Rather, it's the entity having the physical contact with them. Since fighting them off, they've kind of stopped coming around, whereas they used to come around once every 1 to 2 weeks, he said. He also had some other interesting things to say about what's been happening with him since then too. Quote, after the fight, all they ever do now is circle me. That's like how you or I would to an object we've never seen before, end quote. So basically he's saying that they now seem angry still and vengeful, but that they are very cautious and seem more curious than anything else. Either that or they're pissed even more and trying to figure out a way to hurt him. Do they fear him fighting back? We'll get to that after we finish discussing Steven Painter's story, I promise. Despite most of the people he knows whom he's confided in about the visitations and the attacks and the diagnosis of the medical community, Steven will not accept that the visitations and what happens during them aren't real and merely a figment of his imagination or subconscious. He said, quote, I'm told it's my brain. Science tells me it's a fault with me, but my heart tells me it's not, and I don't know how or what the hell is going on. I'm 31 now, and I know I'm stuck with it, but I would like some answers, end quote. He recently received at least one answer while talking to that old girlfriend who was in the bed with him the night he fought back. He's still very close to her. She told him the encounters aren't all in his head. He explained, quote, a few years ago, I was in hospital with a bacteria infection and was very, very ill. She told me something that she never mentioned before, so that was the first time I ever heard it, end quote. The night before the ex-girlfriend took him to the hospital, he was lying in bed and sweating out a serious fever. He started breathing really heavily, and so she leaned in to wake him up gently, but saw something she didn't expect when she did so. He said, quote, she caught in the corner of her eye a large man, a shadow that was lit by the street light, end quote. She blinked once, thinking that surely it was just a trick of her imagination, but when she opened her eyes again, it was still there. She tried blinking it away one more time, and when she opened her eyes a second time, it was gone. Steven said he immediately woke up and asked her, quote, did he scare you? It can't even stop when I'm ill, end quote. Due to the extremely high fever, Steven said he doesn't remember anything about that night and is going by what his ex-girlfriend told him. The incident convinced his skeptical ex-girlfriend that everything he had been saying all along was real. She told him, quote, after that, I never believed what the doctors said to you, end quote. After that as well, she didn't sleep without leaving at least one light on, especially when she was spending the night with Steven. So this traumatized her even when she wasn't with him. She was afraid that those shadows were going to come back for her. Now, why did I tell you guys that story right after speaking briefly about hungry ghosts who feed off of our fear energy? Class? Because I believe it's all connected. Like I said in my book about shadow entities, I believe they feed off all of our intense emotions, even some of the good ones, like our sexual energy. Some people have reported seeing shadow people lurking while they're getting it on with their partners. How do you explain that one? There's not going to be much fear there, or not in a normal, everyday sexual encounter between like a husband and wife or partners. Most of the time, though, the other person is oblivious to them and they're only there for their intended target. I think that's a little bit different from the hungry ghosts in that it seems to me, from my experience and because of all the research I've done into the subject, that shadow beings always have a specific living person that they're after for whatever reason, whereas other lower vibrational entities will grab at and go for whoever is in their general vicinity that looks like they would be susceptible to being fed off of. What about those silver cords? I have never even explored this territory before of thinking of silver cords, soul connections with shadow entities. Is that why they're usually after a specific person? Are they somehow bonded? What went wrong? Something had to have gone wrong somewhere. I mean, it's bad enough we don't know what they are, where they're from. And now hearing something like this, if you don't realize how terrifying that is, what the implications of that are, then lucky you. Look, I know shadow people aren't demons. I also know that they've never been a living human being before. They've never been a person. But I also believe that there are several different types of shadow beings, and some of them are one thing and others of them are other things. The possibilities are endless, really, when you have nothing to go on except speculation and opinion. I've seen a few people being attacked by shadow beings, and sometimes the Hat Man is there, but he always just lurks and watches. It's extremely rare for him to become involved, and actually, I don't think I've ever actually seen that happen. I've heard about it sometimes. The point of all of this that I'm trying to make, guys, is that we need to educate ourselves and believe enough in something bigger than us and darker than us, like malignant and malevolent, downright evil entities that hate us because they covet one thing we have that they need, but they will never, ever themselves be able to have, even with all of the feeding off of us that we do, and that is our soul. However, their rage is increased because they also can't kill us. Because if they do, our soul leaves and goes somewhere they aren't allowed to go, and they cannot follow us. Therefore, they cannot feed off of us. In spirit, we are far more valuable and far stronger, and they wouldn't dare. They wouldn't survive. They wouldn't stand a chance. Remember, love is the key to everything, and love really does conquer all. It's cheesy. It's cliche. It is so freaking true. It's all about love and joy, hope and laughter. So no matter how impossible it may seem, when confronted with these entities specifically, but you can try it with all other feeders as well, force yourself to laugh and then keep on laughing. It will be angry, but it will know there's no food there for it, that there's no food with you. As your energy absorbs the laughter and your spirit switches from terror and weakness to joy and strength, once you do that enough, they will leave you alone. Like, do that 3 or 4 times, like through 3 or 4 visitations. They'll leave you alone. I promise they will. I knew a woman who was being dragged throughout her house, off of her bed and off of her couch by one shadow being who just kept telling me he wanted to take, which is unusual in and of itself because normally they don't communicate at all, but this one was a rare one with whom I could telepathically connect with for brief moments, seconds even of time. It was dragging her and slamming her into walls and doors by her arms, ankles, legs, wrists, and even by her hair. It was going to kill her. She was so weak and she felt so defeated, not to mention the absolute terror she felt nightly and sometimes even during the day when she randomly would experience these vicious and brutal attacks. I implored her to go away for a week or even just a weekend, even on a staycation, and do something she loved, to be around the people she loved the most, and to laugh and smile as much as she possibly could. When she returned back home, her energy was elevated, and the moment she saw the entity that had been her torturer for so long, she immediately channeled those good feelings and forced herself to think of them and chuckle. And then she laughed, and her husband, who was aware of the situation and feeling just as hopeless and helpless, joined in, and within 2 minutes, the entity was gone. She wasn't attacked at that time. It returned sporadically for about a year, but eventually it went away and it never came back, and it never touched her again after that. Love, joy, and laughter are the key, guys. In that case, the shadow being apparently thought she was a shadow being and wanted her to go with it to wherever it was going. I've also seen that on the Dead Files once or twice, I think. So it is happening. I mean, it's just very, very rare. In that specific instance, and I'm sure in millions of others, love, joy, and laughter won, and they will always win in the end if you believe in it enough and if you try to do, to the best of your ability, what's right every single time. That's all I have for you tonight, guys. Please give this video a big thumbs up if you enjoyed the content, if you enjoyed hanging out with me, if you enjoyed hanging out with one another in the premiere, and if you're enjoying my 7 nights of Halloween Spooky Fest. Check out the description box for some important links, how to donate to the channel, PayPal, Cash App, Amazon, wish list, gift link. If you'd like to purchase a personal reading, they are $20 to my PayPal or Cash App. Please be specific about which month you would like and what it's for. Make sure I have an email address if you want to email me for any reason. All of my information is in the description box, including products, things like that. Specialized Gemma Jade and Ghost Dragons merchandise at jivecreations.com. Go on over, give a shout to Arisha, support her, help her out while also supporting and helping out the channel. She does a lot, pretty much anything you need to be done, customized for you. So even if you don't want Gemma Jade and Ghost Dragon merch, go over there, show her some support. She is amazing, as is her beautiful twinny, my other sister from another mister, Miss Lotus Girl. Be kind to each other, guys. It doesn't cost anything. Be kind to yourselves and never accept anything less than others being kind to you. If nobody told you today you're amazing, you're fantastic, you're wonderful, you can do anything you set your mind to, and don't let anyone tell you any different. I got your back. I believe in you. Always go in grace, smile at a stranger, and happy Halloween. Bye.